This thing's getting going. Great. I don't know what announcements you want to do.
Oh, we'll just do some general. There's some new faces here, so we'll just do some general. Yeah. Is it switched over?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Ken, and this is James, and we're your organizers. We're going to have two speakers tonight. James is one, and Peter is another. And we're talking about TypeScript definitions and what you can do with them. Do you have any announcements that you want to give, James?
For those, there's some first-timers here, right? Thanks for coming. Glad to see you. Just so you know, we have started experimenting with live streaming. So we have a camera, and we're going to be using Google Hangouts and switching between screen sharing and showing what's happening up front here. No one here is on camera, to be clear, so just kind of want to put that out there. It is being recorded.
But if you heckle us, they will hear you.
Well, having a TypeScript meetup, we're a small group, but it's still pretty unique that we can actually continue this from month to month and support it. And we've heard from people in other parts of the country that said, "Hey, could you record? Could you share this?" So that prompted us to do this, and we're experimenting with it and seeing where it goes. We haven't got a lot of traction with it, to be clear, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I wanted to share some of my favorite things that I'm learning right now. And I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to share, but right now I'm getting interested in Angular 2. Really like the framework. It's not a framework. What is it called? It's a platform. I really like it. It's once you get it set up, it's nice and easy to use. So if you're not familiar, I suggest getting familiar. Very TypeScript centric. I'm listening to some podcasts lately. There's a podcast called oh shoot, now I gotta pull out my phone. Soft Skills Developer. Hang on. Still on the list. Soft Skills Engineering. It's all about talking to people rather than developing code, right? So learning how to interact with project managers or clients, that kind of thing. Even talking to your boss about getting a raise and how to do better as an employee. I'm a very big fan of the Shop Talk show. So if you aren't familiar, it's a web dev show about JavaScript, HTML, anything web related. Pretty funny, good show. And then lastly, there is the front end happy hour, which is kind of just a group of Netflix and LinkedIn employees that kind of just get together and have hard liquor and talk about things. Entertaining. So I recommend you check this out. So if anybody else has anything they'd like to share, like what they're interested in right now, please stand up and let us know.
Just go ahead and answer this again.
So this will be on recorded, so you can write it down. But it's front end happy hour. And it is Soft Skills Engineering and the Shop Talk show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did Soft Skills just have Brad Greenhoff?
No, he's been a guest. So he was like a recent guest. It's Dave Smith and Jameson Dance hosted.
Nice. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Anyone got anything that they want to plug? Anything they want to talk about that they're working on? If not, I'm just going to talk. So now's your chance. All right. For anyone who might be interested in what's happening in the .NET world, which has been rapidly changing the last couple of years, there is a local conference happening in a couple of weeks, .NET French. They held it last year. This is their second year. A lot of great speakers. It's not corporate Microsoft.NET. This is like the opposite of that. So it's being held at the Crystal Ballroom. It's going to be a very fun event. It's affordable. ASP.NET Core just released yesterday. So we have a cross-platform of ASP.NET available to us, and it's like a new thing, right? So anyway, just wanted to mention that. That's going to be a cool thing.
That's news.
Core's out of beta.
Yeah, it's been RTM. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great.
The tooling they still say is still in preview, so they're still working on some tooling things. But you can develop and debug ASP.NET Core apps on Mac and Linux inside of Visual Studio Code now. So.
I built like a beta, I think recently. It took a nice 5 gigs of my hard drive. But
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to try to build it.
Yeah, you know, they claim they're like 8 or 10 times faster than Node.js on the server. So the big push there is performance, right? Utah JS conference coming up in Salt Lake City, September 16th. Nathan Walker in the back is going to be speaking there about NativeScript.
2 talks, yeah.
Oh, 2 talks.
2 talks on NativeScript.
Awesome.
1 intro, 1 advanced.
Yep, very cool. Also speaking will be Daniel Rosenwasser. He is the program manager of the TypeScript team. We had the benefit or the pleasure, thank you. The word was escaping me there. He came and spoke at our group last October, so we were very excited about that. Got a chance to hang out with Daniel. So he's going to be there as well, talking about TypeScript. And I'm going to be there as well. I'm going to be talking about reactive programming with RxJS. So if you're looking, this is, I don't, what, do you know what tickets are selling for? Like, it's affordable, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's buy tickets right there. I'm curious now myself. Like,
It's a single,
It's free.
it's a single day event.
120.
Oh, 120 bucks.
Yeah. And you know, Utah's not far. So
Beautiful city. It'll be mid-September, so it'll probably be decent weather, though not skiing weather yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can get, if you buy tickets early, you can fly there for under $200, and the hotels are reasonably, affordable. So anyway, should be a great conference. There's some decent speakers there, and us as well. So what else? Oh, and I have a shameless plug that I'm going to do just because I can. This is my website, and I have my list of upcoming talks, including this. But I'm going to be doing an online presentation for Newbie Remote Conf. There's a gentleman who does some podcasts, and he does some online conferences. So this one's focused specifically on people who are entering the industry, who are new to the industry. And so I'm going to be giving a talk called Can Anyone Learn to Program? I'll be on September 1st down at Willamette Valley Software Engineers Meetup, who Angelo in the back of the room hosts that meetup. So I'll be talking about the latest on TypeScript there. On 9/6, PadNug, which is the local .NET user group, they meet out in Hillsboro on the Intel campus. I'll be talking about ASP.NET Core then. There's Utah JS, which we just talked about. Oh, and the Node PDX conference, which just happened last week, they recorded my talk on TypeScript decorators.
It's really good.
It was good.
So thank you.
This is the last talk of the day.
I didn't know they were going to do this. It's a little weird watching yourself give a live presentation, so I learned a lot by having this opportunity. But so anyway, if you're interested in learning more about TypeScript decorators, that's a half-hour talk that gives you like a light, high-level overview into what decorators are.
I watched it for 15 minutes, and I was immediately like, okay, I'm going to start to code decorators. It was really cool. I mean, it gave you enough information in the first 15 minutes to put to practice.
If you're going to do anything around Angular 2, knowing something about decorators is beneficial because it's an important part of that platform. And it's also got a broader base than that too. Other frameworks and libraries are taking advantage of it, but watch the talk and I'll tell you about that. So, all right, anything else before we get started? No? All right, let's get into it.
You need TypeScript definition help.
Yes. Well, only if you knew someone who could help you with that.
I locked the door, by the way.
Thank you. All right, are we good? Cool. So I'm going to start with a little half-hour introduction that's just going to focus on the acquisition part of definition or declaration files. And then Peter is going to follow me, and he's going to go into depth with how you write your own definition files and how those are created and what the structure of those look like. But first, we'll start by just talking about what are definition files a little bit, but also like why we care about them and how do we find them and install them. Before that, though, I just kind of want to get a feel if like who here is totally brand new to TypeScript? Okay. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes kind of talking about static data typing, what it is, why we care about it, and what that has to do in relation with these definition files that we're talking about. So to start with, why do we care? Well, static data typing is an optional part of TypeScript. You don't have to use it, but it's one of the main 3 pillars, and it's one of the reasons why I think typically why people even pay attention to TypeScript. Type is in the name, right? So if you weren't going to care about static data typing, you might use something else like Babel instead of TypeScript if you just want a transpilation. So it's an important part, but it is optional, just to be clear. Having static data typing gives us a lot of interesting things that happen inside of the editor, including statement completion, like real statement completion, not we noticed you typed this a second time, so we're going to guess that's what you're typing. It's actually looking at the type and the objects that you're dotting off of and knowing what's available to you. So let's just take a quick look at what that looks like and when it breaks down, because it does break down, but there's a solution for that. This is a very simple application. I have a single HTML page. Oh, sorry. It's really simple. It looks like a mountain. It's abstract, right? All right, sorry about that. Okay, here's the application. I have a single HTML page. All that it's doing is loading, and that's really annoying. Hide. Is it still sharing?
Yeah. Okay.
We're Google Hangouts noobs, so we're still kind of figuring this out, so bear with us, please. Okay, so it's loading 2 scripts. It's loading myClass.js and 2 files and app.js. Inside of myClass, there's really not much going on here. It defines a class called myClass, which has a constructor, and I'm using a shortcut syntax here for defining properties. Basically, you can in your arguments that you're accepting through your constructor, you can use this public keyword to say these arguments should be installed as properties on the object that's being created by the constructor. I could just as easily have added these up here by saying prop1 is string and prop2 is number, and then down here you would say this dot prop1 equals prop1, like that, right? This is the shortcut syntax. You'll notice that I am giving some typing here. So I'm saying that prop1 is I expect that to be a string, and prop2 I expect it to be a number. And we can see that in action if we come over here to my app file. I'm instantiating an instance of my class, and if I try to pass in a number where a string is expected, we immediately get the editor telling us that I can't assign a number where a string is expected, okay? So that, in its basic sense, is what the language service, what the compiler is doing for us inside of the editor when we're writing our code. We can also, if we say my class and we dot off of that, we're able to see the properties and methods, if we had methods on this class that are available to us to call. And if I had methods, it would show you what the signature of those methods were. Now, this is a really arbitrary, simple class, so not a very interesting example in terms of complexity. But imagine, if you will, that you're using a third-party library like jQuery, and you type $, and nothing happens, right? And if we hover over here to say, like, well, why is it angry? It tells us, it says, cannot find name $. Well, $, hasn't been defined inside of our application. I've defined my class, which is a type that's part of my application, and I can use that inside my app. But $, is not defined anywhere in my app. The TypeScript compiler doesn't know anything about it, right? there is a quick and dirty workaround. So we can say declare var $any. Any type in TypeScript basically says, I'm not going to tell you what the type is. This is the default behavior that you get with any variable inside of JavaScript at runtime, right? You could say var $equals some string, and then on the next line, you could say that equals a number now. And JavaScript is completely happy with those kinds of operations. Any says, that's fine. We could take this and assign it a string, and then we can turn around and say, no, change my mind. $sign is now a number. And the compiler is not going to complain about that because we haven't constrained it to be anything more than everything that's available to us, right? So that's a quick and dirty workaround, but it's not really what we're looking for because, again, we're using TypeScript, we should get the benefits of using TypeScript, right? So the way to do this properly is to bring in a definition file for jQuery and have a reference to that in our project so that the compiler knows everything it needs to know about what's available when we type $. That's what this talk is about how to find and get those files, and then Peter will talk about how those files are written. Okay. So let's talk real quickly about the acquisition piece of this. So acquisition simply just means the processor workflow of acquiring those definition files. We call them d.ts. So you'll see people writing or hear people talking about d.ts. It simply just means like TypeScript definition. That D in there is the definition part. There's no implementation in these files, as you'll see later. They just are interfaces describing what's there, but there's no code beyond that. So why do we need it? We need it because virtually every application is going to use some code that we don't own, right? We're going to pull in some libraries, frameworks, code that lives and has been developed elsewhere. We're going to bring that code into our apps. We want TypeScript to be aware of what those are and give us all the benefits of knowing that we're passing the right things to method calls, and that also it helps us developers when we're writing our code to know what's available to us to call. You'll find in general that you might use documentation less because you won't have to be like, oh wait, what's the third parameter type method call? It will tell you here what that is typically, and you'll get that support. So where do we get these files? So definitely typed, which is available at GitHub, definitely typed / definitely typed, has been the primary source for definition files. This repo is huge. If you go there, GitHub truncates the list of folders at about K. It's alphabetical, and they just say, there's way too many folders here. We can't display them all. So going to the GitHub repo to browse and try to find what you're looking for doesn't really work because of the way that it's structured. There's also now other sources. Having to have a single repo and a single organization in charge of definition files is a little limiting, right? So there's others that are showing up on GitHub. NPM is also being used. Bower has been used by some people. NuGet, if you're in the .NET ecosystem, sometimes is used, and more, right? Now the history of acquisition has been a little interesting, and the change keeps speeding up, unfortunately. So if you go back to the dark ages of TypeScript, or maybe even the dark ages of your own learning curve, right? Because there's tools, but maybe you don't know about the tools. So your first inclination might be, I'm just going to go find the definition file that I need, view the raw on GitHub, copy and paste that, and bring a file into my project, which absolutely works, right? But now you've got to commit that file as an artifact as part of your project, and you don't really have a good way, if you end up with multiple definitions, you don't really have a good way of expressing what definitions, what dependencies you need in your project. It's just not the way to do it. Can you imagine not using NPM or Bower or some package manager and just manually, yeah, we did that at one point, but who does that anymore, right? So cons, or pros. The big one here is that this was easy to understand, right? Like you could explain this to people and show it inside of a couple-minute demo, and people are like, oh, I can totally do that. No learning curve, right? The cons, well, like I just mentioned, it was clumsy, and you had to commit your files with your repo, and there was no tooling or toolchain support whatsoever. Enter TSD. So this is the TypeScript definition package manager. So someone, it seems pretty obvious, but it took a while for this to come onto the scene. Someone thought, wait, we need a package manager dedicated to definition files. So what TSD would do is allow you to query, and this worked against specifically that definitely typed repo. So you could query against a keyword and see what matches came back, and then you could say TSD install jQuery, and then you could pass in the save flag, and that would create a tsd.json file that was very much like a lightweight package.json file that would list the dependencies of your definition files that your project was dependent upon. That would allow someone to come in a new environment or another developer and just say TSD install. And that would go fetch all the definition files from definitely typed and put them in a known location, right? That's a huge improvement over the manual, like go get what you need and check it into your project. Pros, everything I just mentioned there, right? It's still relatively easy to understand and learn, pretty easy syntax overall. You now had a way to define what your dependencies were for your project, which was a huge improvement. And you didn't have to commit your d.ts files anymore. And some of those files get to be like large, like thousands of lines of definition. Cons, to my knowledge, it only worked against definitely typed. Is that? Yeah. So it was limiting in that regard, right?
You could give it a hash on another repo.
Oh.
I think the tsd.json allowed you to plug in another repo.
Okay, so there was a workaround, but it wasn't very common though. Most people just used the defaults and used it against definitely typed. Oh, and at this point in time, module systems, like in the browser, were still pretty cutting edge, so pretty much everything was global. If you were using Lodash, you just had underscore up there in the global namespace, or $, and you weren't importing or keeping things out of that space. So enter typings, and typings came out January-ish, December, like it was around the beginning of the year. So it's only really been about 6 months that typings has been around to the scene, and it was, I don't know, there must have been warning signs, but I wasn't paying attention to that space, and it was like one day we were like here, and it's like, oh, there's this new thing called typings. And in fact, TSD just started giving warnings saying this is deprecated.
Maintainer of typings is also maintainer of definitely.
Yeah, they took over the project. They developed a new tool called typings, and it just completely displaced TSD. So what is TSD? It's another command line tool just like TSD, so it's a package manager. This time, though, they made it more robust. So not only do you search against, well, you can search against their own typings registry, which has pointers to definitely typed, so you could still get to those files. But now, because they've created this new registry, you can create entries in there that point to other GitHub repos, to NPM, to Bower, to bare HTTP URLs, or even you could use the tool just to install files off of your local file system if you wanted to. You also could, for the first time, easily customize the global alias. So, for instance, if you wanted to use jQuery, but you wanted to say we want to name it JVal or JOld or something else, you could use typings to rename what that global alias was. And they made the idea of definitions being in modules like a first-class priority, as opposed to some sort of afterthought or maybe not even thinking about it at all. The pros, it supported modules, like I just said, and it supported a variety of sources, so it sort of broadened the ecosystem. The cons, now this is just my 2 cents, but I initially found typings a little jarring. Like the documentation, at least initially, was pretty lacking. It has gotten, I think, substantially better, but that first couple weeks was a little rough. It was like, what is this thing? And wait, what is it doing again with these definition files? Like, all that was a little fuzzy to me, and it was kind of a pain in the ass that you had to go from I know the thing to all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from underneath you and you're like, I gotta go take time and read what this other thing is now, right? That's always kind of sucks when you're just trying to get work done. We're going to do a couple quick demos here. We're going to use typings to install a global definition, and then we're going to use typings to install a module scope type definition. We'll install the same package in both cases, but you'll just see like what is the difference and how are those two things handled differently. I have an equally unexciting application for this example as well, but we'll take a quick look at it here. This is even less interesting. It has one file in it, and I have just because it was a convenient example. This is not an endorsement in any way, but I have used it before, so I shouldn't complain, I guess, right, Ken? So here I'm saying let view model equals just an empty object because this app doesn't actually do anything. And then I'm calling something on a KO object or a variable. And of course, TypeScript has no clue what KO is supposed to be. Does anyone here know what KO is or should be? Knockout, right? I actually love knockout, but it feels a little long in the tooth these days, but I don't know. I liked it. It was lightweight. It did good what it did. So. So we need to bring knockout into our project. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, you know what? I want to bring in my definition file, and I expect this thing just to be globally available. So first thing we need to do is, well, you would need to install typings if you don't have it installed. So you would say install typings. You're probably going to install it globally just so that that package manager like Bower, NPM is just available. But it's also probably a good idea to say that on this project that we're working on, that typings is something that we need as a development dependency.
Why is that?
If I hand my project off to you and you go to npm install, you're going to expect the tools that you need to build and run that project to be there, right? And you don't want to have the README file walk him through installing that globally. You just want to say, I expect this to be here.
Would you say continuous integration also needs that?
Yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, man. Yeah, good point. So tooling, right? So if you're using like a CI server or some automated process that needs to look at how to build your application, this is absolutely essential. We have typings. We've listed it as a dev dependency. So now we can say typings init. And that's a really sophisticated command. All that it did was add this typings.json file. And if we take a look at that, it's just a very simple JSON data structure. This is our package.json for these TypeScript definition files. And so we're looking for knockout. So we're going to say typings search knockout. And that's going to line wrap very bizarrely because there's a lot of columns in here. There. These three are the three that we really care about. The rest of these most of these are extensions or plugins for knockout, so we're just going to kind of ignore those. But if you look at the difference between these three, the source is npm, DT, which stands for definitely typed or global. I'm going to ignore the global. That's another category, if you will, that typings has in their registry. That's not the definitely typed definition. I went and looked it up this afternoon because I was like, well, what definition is in global? Someone else created a definition for knockout and put it in there. I'm just going to ignore the existence of that for now. We're going to focus in on the definitely typed one, which we can use for a global definition. Yeah, it's not the same source though, as far as I can tell. So I didn't look any further than that. There may be more. There's obviously more to the story that I just didn't spend time looking into. So typings install knockout, and we can, if we don't specify the source, it's going to default to npm, then we're not going to get the definition file that we'd expect. So we type dt tilde like that to hint it and say we want it from definitely typed. We also want to say that we're expecting this to be a global definition, and then we'll save that. Then if we go take a look at our typings.json file, we'll now see that we have a global dependency to knockout, and that's the identifier to the registry of where that lives, where that came from.
It's confusing on the service because the global entry you would think would be the global dependency somehow. Sourced in the list. Or
I think it actually would do the same thing. It's just that they don't. If you go look at the registry in typings, they have these large buckets of categories, right? They have E and V for environment. They have NPM. They have global. There's like 6 or 7 categories. So when you register your definition file with typings, you can pick one or more. I don't. Peter, are you going to talk about that as part of your talk?
that is confusing right there. Okay. Everything changed from the first version to the second.
Yes. So, spoiler alert. I'm covering typings because today, if you're doing production TypeScript, this is what you're going to deal with. If you wait a little bit and wait for TypeScript 2.0 to come out, which I'm going to cover next, that's the big reveal, everything changes again. So, knowing that, all of you can sit here right now and go, yes, James, this looks awesome. We understand it. Cool. And knowing that when TypeScript 2.0 comes out, you're going to be like, I don't care about this, right? It's changing again, right? And I've got some good jokes coming up, so I didn't want to spoil that too much. So yeah, it's confusing, and that's one of the main reasons that I think the TypeScript team said, this is getting complicated, like this is actually going to deter people from wanting to do TypeScript, honestly. It's gotten that out of hand. Yep. So don't get too hung up on this, but I did want to kind of drive home, because there are situations that the new approach may not necessarily solve. So you need to be aware that there's options, right? If we go take a look at the project, the other thing I wanted to point out is that we now have this typings folder that has been brought in. So this is the equivalent of node modules for type definition files. And if you look inside of there, you'll see that we have a globals folder, a knockout folder, and now we have the index.d.ts, which is the actual definition file that we were looking for in the first place, right? And as you can see, this is actually kind of a smallish one. And it's, because Knockout is not a big library, right? It doesn't have a huge API surface in comparison to like Lodash. Lodash has a lot of methods, right? It's a rather large API. So this one is relatively compact, and you could read it in a sitting and kind of wrap your mind around what's there. But now that we have this available to us, if we come over to that file that we were looking at that wasn't compiling, now it is. And if we hover over apply bindings, we know stuff about apply bindings, including, well, be so zoomed in there, including the parameters that are expected from us. This one actually is not documented as much as some. Some definition files have like comments in them, and when you get that, you see these comments appearing. So I think Lodash actually, you might see that a little bit later. It gets really rich, and it's almost like having inline documentation, which is great. So that's global. We can just, we're not importing anything. We can just ko dot, and we're getting a list of all the properties and methods that are available on that object. Okay. Pretty cool, right? That's what we were looking for. Now we have this assistance, this help, in making sure that we're using it correctly. Yes. Yeah, so you can just put your cursor there in F12, and it will just take you to that in the definition file. And you can keep doing that, right? So all of those are innies, but for instance, if you look here on 422, and you're like, well, what's knockout computed define? You can F12 that, and now you're looking at that interface, right? That works with your own code as well. So if you have a bunch of classes or modules that you're referring to, and you're calling a method or a property, put your cursor there, F12 or Alt F12 to peek it in line, and you'll just will be navigated. So yeah, symbol-based navigation.
And refactoring.
And refactoring. You can rename, right? This is a bad application to, well, no, I could show it here. So F2, and then I could say view model 2, and then it renamed the reference, right? And keep in mind that's unimpressive, but imagine, if you will, that we were renaming a property in another file or a method in another file that was called from 15, 20 different locations in our app. The compiler knows about all those instances, and it will update them appropriately without having to do some find all string magic search and replace, right?
Unless you're using magic string.
Well, okay. So let's that's global. Let's look at module real quick, just so you can see the difference in that. Same thing here. We need to install, oh, excuse me, npm install typings save dev, and then we'll do typings init, which will create that typings.json. And then we can say typings install knockout save. And in this case, I can do less because I'm not specifying the source, because I'm just going to use npm in this case. That's the default value. And we're not doing global, we're doing modules, so I'm just going to say save.
Now, how did you know this knockout was a module?
I believe by nature of the fact that it's in the npm registry that way. The intention of that is that it's configured to be used with common JS modules. There's no guarantee that that's the case, but that's their intention, right? That's the reason for that global folder in their registry, is to say, hey, if you're not writing definitions that are module friendly or module system friendly, don't put them there, right? There is a way, and I'm not very knowledgeable on this. I know some pieces of this, but not all. I'm actually looking forward to see if Peter covers this in his talk. About you can write definition files that are flexible, right? That can be used. In fact, the Lodash example I'm going to show in a bit can be used statically, globally, but it also can be used as a module. So it covers both those use cases from one definition file. So there could be definition files in the npm source that might actually do that. But the idea behind that is that if you're using npm, you're using Browserify, Webpack, or you're a node, right? If we go look at, did I open this up? I don't think I did. So let's open this up in Visual Studio Code. And real quickly, I wanted to show you what the difference, because this is something that typings does that the new approach won't do. So instead of global, we have modules. And if we go look at the definition file here, it's different. The main body of it is identical, but you'll notice that now the entire thing is wrapped in a module, which keeps this definition file from bleeding into our global namespace. So the compiler, if you don't import this, the compiler won't expect that that's there if you just type ko dot. In fact, we can demonstrate that by coming over to this file, and you can see that we're, well, I gotta configure my task runner so we can build. We can see that that's happy, and we get the same behavior that we were getting before. But if we comment that out, immediately it says we don't know what KO is, just kind of driving home the point that this is not globally available to us like it was before, even though we have the definition file there. We have to import it and treat it as a module. Okay? Any questions about that before we move off of typings? Yes?
So that was because you got it from the npm source.
Yep. Well, and I omitted the global flag, right? Like
Oh, that's not global like for your field, but for the app.
Correct. Correct. Yep.
So the library knockout, you installed it via npm. So that's why you had to get the require common JS library.
If you go look at knockout source code, they actually are following a UMD, Universal Module Definition pattern. Their IFI that wraps all their code has a series of if statements that looks to see what's available like in global, right? So they're kind of sniffing the environment and saying, do we have a module and a module exports? And if we do, oh, this feels like common.js. If that's not there, they check the next thing. So it's a very common pattern. Not everyone uses it, to be clear, but if you go look at their code, they try to be flexible in that regard and do the right thing at the right time. So they're not actually publishing different versions of their library, right? They have a universal approach to it. Let's go back to the slides and wrap up typings and get on with the more interesting thing here. Okay, so a couple, we mentioned this briefly, but just I wanted to show you the syntax. Typings has this concept of versioning. So you can do an after the name and specify the specific version. Those have to be listed that way in the registry. So a lot of entries in the registry don't have versions, to be clear. But if you do a search and you see versions are available, you can install a specific version. And here's that name flag that we were talking about. So we're installing jQuery, but instead of $, it would be using old J as the global alias. The install command for typings is got a lot of options. We're not going to cover this, we don't have time, but I just kind of wanted to give you a feel for the complexities in here and like the different things you can do with typings install. Let's talk about, with the time that we have left, let's talk about TypeScript 2.0. So third time's the charm, right? So we had TST, we had typing 6 months ago, now we've got something new. So this is the new hope. So just trying to be funny. So the TypeScript team is actually working very, very friendly with the people who have worked on the tools. They're respective of that fact. So luckily, this is not the TypeScript team saying, to heck with this, we're going to now say do this, and we don't care what anyone else is doing. They've been collaborating very closely with the people who worked on TSD and the people who worked on typings to make sure that their concerns and ideas and thoughts were at least considered. If they're not implemented, they're at least thinking of those edge cases and doing the easy stuff that is possible, right? So why another change? I think the big motivation here is to make it easier, right? And on top of it, it's really nice that there's now going to be an officially supported way to find definition files and to bring them into your projects. We haven't had that, right? The official story was use someone else's tool or do it manually. So it is nice that we have an official way of doing this now. So how does it work? This is the easiest demo of all, which is really great. So first things first, well, all I did was change directories. I could do it again if you want to see that. So first things first, what I'm going to be showing you is only available right now if you're getting the nightly builds for TypeScript. This isn't released yet, okay? They had to make a small change to how the compiler walks your folders, walks where modules could live to look for definition files. And I'll talk about exactly what that change is in a minute. But just so you know, you have to install the nightly build. You can do it through NPM, so it's really easy, and it's really easy to revert to the production version. So you can do this without being afraid that you're going to completely frack up your system, okay? What else did I want? Oh, let me just show you the code. There was one other small change I had to make to Visual Studio Code to get the editor to use the nightly build instead of the latest production release. But talk to me offline or hit me up on Twitter if you want to talk about like what that is. I can walk you through what I did. My GitHub repo also have the notes on all that as well. So this is, again, a very simple app. I'm saying import star as underscore from Lodash. And right now, it's saying can't find module Lodash. So let's fix this. If we come out here, let's start by installing Lodash. And we'll save that because we expect that to be part of our application when we deploy this. Now we're going to install the type definitions. So we say install at types low dash. Oh, it helps if I write the command correctly. npm install at types low dash. And this time I'm going to say that this is not something we need to deploy. This is part of our development environment, right? And if we switch back to Visual Studio Code, and we build, now it finds it. And if we hover over camel case, and if we know, okay, let's try this. Oh, now it's unhappy again. All right, hang on. Sometimes it gets confused, so let's do this. Let's go all the way out, and then we'll do that. Okay. Yay! So there's the documentation that I was talking about, right? Now it's telling us that it converts string to camel case, because that comment is included in the definition file. And if we dot off of underscore, then we see, and the list is long, right? You can see how small the scroll bar is over there. All the methods that are available to us off of in the Lodash library. Okay. So what did we do? Well, the new mechanism is about as simple as it gets. We installed Lodash just like you would install Lodash using npm today, and we used npm to install the Lodash definition file off of this @types scoped package. So what @types is a scoped package that's updated nightly right now. Maybe that'd be more frequently in the future. I'm not sure. They basically have a script, right, that runs every night. Right now, it's using definitely typed, that giant repo that we talked about earlier on GitHub, as the source for what goes into @types. And you can just go to npm's website and look up that account, if you will, or that package, and it's a long, long list of all of the sub packages that are on there. Pretty easy, right? So basically the idea behind this is don't fix what ain't broke. We already have a package manager that everyone knows how to use and works well, and it does versioning even. We're just going to build on top of that. So that's what they did. A couple of things to note. This solution is somewhat extensible, but it's nowhere near as flexible as typings. For instance, you can't change the alias, or at least at this point in time, there's not an easy way to change the alias for global definition files. I don't think I would ever have a need for that. Maybe someone would, and that would be a reason why you might need to use typings. If you go look, and I have a resources markdown file on my repo that has links to issues on GitHub. So all of this is open source and developed in the open. You can go read all the conversations that are happening in the community around the development of this feature. And people are saying like, oh, wait, but I have this weird situation that I do this, I jump through all these hoops to get, and they're like, are you gonna deal with that? And then you'll see the reply and the conversation. And sometimes they say, oh, but if you do use this with that, then you could do it. Sometimes they just say, no, we're not gonna support that. Well, the good news is if you don't like the official supported version, ignore it. If you're using TSD, manual, typings, and the compiler is finding your files, it will continue to find them in 2.0 without any, it's not a breaking change, okay? npm @types is what we talked about. That's the location where you can go see. They're gonna work on having redirection. So inside of definitely type, they're gonna support the idea of a JSON file that will say the definition actually lives somewhere else. So it becomes a registry like typings as a registry, but it's simpler. To my knowledge, there's just the one top level node or folder. But they are going to allow people to not have to do their PRs and their maintenance on definitely typed. That's not implemented yet, but they're saying that it's coming at some point. Type discovery. Because you can't really conveniently do that on GitHub because of the number of folders, they have made this simple little website. It's a very, very basic, fill in the box, and then they show you the list of results. But if you're just curious to browse, that's an easy way to do it. That's type acquisition. As a type acquisition story, like I said, we're on a cusp. New things are coming. So if you're new to TypeScript, don't stress out over the fact that typings might feel like, oh, geez, like I got to go learn this other thing. You just wait a little bit. 2.0 should come out soonish, maybe in the next month. You know, who knows? But when it does come out, then we have an officially supported way. That's the bottom line, and you don't have to muck around with these third-party tools. Everything content-wise that I had is up on my GitHub repo at TypeScript Type Acquisition. As I was doing my research, I always like to keep a markdown file of like everything I found interesting. That's in there as well if you kind of want to follow my breadcrumb trail of what I did to learn about this, so that you might find that to be helpful as well. And Peter. We're going to need a few minutes to change over, so now's a good time to stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, get a drink, grab something to eat. But yeah, thanks.
So click this link here. Should ask you to log in. No. Well, need your microphone.